all those things. And a note from Brad Lightcap, OpenAI COO, training cycles that used to take years are now taking months. So
All right, I think we're live now. Anyway, this is just a test, trying to kind of understand how to stream information. But one of the thoughts is I was watching this podcast yesterday, and I watch this one pretty regular with Peter and these guys. But they were talking about some of the new models, and we've heard a lot about how dangerous they are. They've had to kind of be locked up. As far as restricted, right? I think restricted is the right word, and the release is not coming as fast as like they created the model and we're not releasing it to the public yet because the fear that it could do real damage is out there. When I say real damage, hacking and exposing systems. And that kind of starts to bring up a few topics that I've had discussions with people about lately, which is the supply chain attacks, which is going into open source libraries that are out on GitHub and some of the open source repositories that are used by hundreds of thousands of applications or tens of thousands, millions of downloads, and they basically sneak in backdoors, and these are basically getting, I guess, more common. And it's a slow infiltration. Put it in there. A discrete library, do a pull request, get something merged in an obscure way, and basically the code can lay dormant for a while, and then eventually they can activate it and they can take control of systems through a vulnerability. There's been a few of these that have happened lately, and one of was the I'm trying to remember the name of the library. It was a TypeScript library. I've got the details on it, and but anyway, that supply chain attack had the potential of really disrupting a lot. And so there's this scenario of, okay, well, you're trying to keep your stuff updated because tech debt and patch management is an important thing, and newer libraries are normally better, but it's easier to hide stuff in them now. And then on the other side, you've got these zero-day attacks where we've got these new models that can exploit almost any vulnerability in code. So they're running the models against libraries and servers that are out there, and they can find the vulnerabilities, and they can almost instantaneously write write scripts that will expose those vulnerabilities, overload buffers, and basically allow the application to break out of the sandbox that it runs in. And that's happened in I think they did Firefox. They were allowed to break out, and then some of the open source operating systems that are traditionally pretty secure, those have been broken as well. And there's some details to these that it's not like, I think on Firefox they actually disabled some of the built-in controls, and I think it's important to understand. But the truth is they're getting more and more powerful, and so now to the point where Claude with Mythos, or Mythos, however you say that, where they're basically saying, hey, we're going to restrain ourselves from releasing this to the public. They created the new the new I guess consortium or project where they're going to let certain paying entities, so Amazon, Microsoft, these larger shops that also work with Anthropic. They're going to let them kind of go in and use the models first to secure their systems, right? And open source foundations, and the idea is run this against your systems, and we will and secure them, right? So you've got like 6 months to basically lock everything down and fix it. And then they'll start opening it up to the rest of the world, and the model will come out. And then some of the discussion that Peter and these guys were talking about is GPT-5.5 Spud, is it going to be just as powerful as the new Anthropic model? And since they're behind, are they going to release it out sooner without allowing some of these security controls to go through place, or to take place by companies? because there is a race occurring, right? I mean, it's everybody's racing for AI, and that got me on an interesting topic or thought process, and this is starting to become true already. So Anthropic has the ability for you to become a partner now, past just like I've had a BAA and a zero retention policy with Anthropic for a while for some of the stuff that I write that's healthcare specific. But now they have these partner programs and partner affiliations, and they're also developing their certifications for Claude Code. Currently doing some of that when I have time. But that sort of got me thinking: is the next phase of this to get access to the more powerful models? You're going to have to be certified. You're going to have to. I mean, they're going to. You're going to have that relationship, right? So they're going to limit the releases. Right now they're doing it to big companies, but they'll eventually have a partner network where they'll limit the releases, and you'll get access to it that way. Because before it was, anybody pays, they get access to the stuff. And if you were a higher tier subscription, you would get access sooner. And so I guess that's kind of the point of this is, are we moving to a stage right now where your access to the models is going to turn into your relationship with the company? So if you want access to the OpenAI models, the latest ones, and this has to some extent been true already, you had to have a paying tier, usually their highest tier, and you get access to the newer models first. But they're actually going to, instead of just paying, you're going to go through background checks and identity checks. Are we going to get to that point? That way they're limiting access to these new models to people who are ethically good, and how they're going to determine that and how they're going to govern and rate that. That was just an interesting thought that maybe we're about to hit that point. One of the mentions on this podcast was, we've been in kind of the golden era of AI to where we've been able to kind of use it and grow and explore it. And now we're going to be limited on how fast we can get it, some of the newer models to kind of create some of the newer tooling and experiences we want to for our users and customers. Anyway, that's kind of the point of this little chat, and also just to kind of test what live streaming is all about. This is kind of the first experience there, going to X and YouTube. Anyway, that's kind of all I'm going to cover in this one. Some of the other stuff in the future might be some demos of some of the stuff I'm working on, talking about repositories and projects. I did just open source some of my first stuff today, which is really related to clinical encounters, to demo data. It's purely synthetic information that I use when I'm testing the ambient scribe application and the clinical clipboard to kind of help test that system out. That's one thing that I've realized that as I've built this application out over the past really 12 to 18 months is, having good synthetic data has been a limiting factor. And obviously, I'm trying to create clinically relevant information, off the top of your head is somewhat difficult, but you really need that to test the capability of the models and how they'll interpret the conversation, and even generate the ICD-10 codes and all that type of stuff to see if you're getting reliable, repeatable results. So that's why I went ahead and created this repository out here called Clinical Encounter Demo Data. And this is really my first open source repo I've ever done. But it's really packs of information, and they've got MP3 files in it. Everything's synthetic. There's no real data in here whatsoever. But you've got some stuff about back pain, and you've got medical assistants collecting vitals, to nurses doing med reconciliation and some of that type of stuff. And then to the physician actually having the exam with the patient in the room. You've got transcripts. You've actually got, so you've got the transcript of all the stuff in both text and VTT format. You've got the PDFs related to, all the information. So there could be like fake insurance cards, handwritten, medication notes with misspellings, and the text is kind of messed up on purpose. That way the OCR works correctly if you're doing that kind of stuff. Over to laboratory results that a patient might bring in or might come from a lab through a fax machine and or into your database. All these are artifacts that could be valuable in testing clinical applications, and that's kind of the purpose of this repo, is to start to share some of this information, because it usually takes a lot of time to create it. Anyway, this is my first attempt at doing this. We'll see if we keep doing more, but appreciate the feedback.